I'm Emily Carter, 29, a wedding photographer in Boston, which means I spend my weekends watching parents beam at their children while a small part of me waits for that look from my own. When Noah and I set a June date, I called home with simple joy in my voice. I said, I have wonderful news. There was a pause, then my mother said, we'll see what we can do. My father took the phone and added, your little garden ceremony is hardly the event of the century. It's trivial. The word landed so clean it knocked the breath out of me. I remember staring at the ring on my finger, wondering how something so bright could feel so small in one sentence. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I hung up and told myself I would not let that word decide my day. I didn't know then that a week later they'd post a beach photo with a caption about the people who matter most, or that months after that they'd need a favour big enough to make that word echo. What I said next changed everything, and that is where my story really begins. From the outside, my childhood looked picture perfect, but the truth behind those walls was very different. I grew up in a house that people admired whenever they passed by. It was a large white colonial with a neat lawn and a picket fence. Neighbours often said it looked like something from a magazine. To me, it looked polished, but I always felt as if I was a guest living inside instead of a daughter. Everything in that house had rules. There were rooms we were not allowed to sit in cups that were only for visitors, and a sense that what mattered most was not comfort, but appearance. My parents, Richard and Margaret Carter, wanted everyone to see success, discipline, and prestige whenever they stepped through the front door. For a long time, I thought that was normal. I thought every family lived like that. It was only as I got older that I began to understand that what was missing was warmth. I remember, most clearly, the wall in our living room. It was filled from top to bottom with photographs of my sister Claire. There was Claire at her piano recital. Claire holding a science fair trophy. Claire in her Honour Society sash. The frames lined the wall like a shrine polished and admired, and then, near the bottom corner, tucked almost behind a shelf, was a single photograph of me. It was from middle school, a picture day photo, nothing more. I would stand there sometimes staring at that wall, trying to imagine what it would look like if my own achievements were displayed there. I wanted to see my art awards, the photographs I had taken for school projects, anything that said I mattered too. But the wall never changed. It stayed as a monument to Claire. Claire was 6 years older than me, and in our family, that gap meant she was already on a path my parents adored. She wanted to become a doctor, and from the moment she spoke that dream aloud, my parents treated her as the shining light of our family. They introduced her proudly at every event. They told neighbours and colleagues about her future. Meanwhile, I was the younger daughter, the one who was expected to smile quietly and not make trouble. One evening, when I was 17, my parents threw a party to celebrate Claire's acceptance to medical school. The house was filled with people. I remember the smell of catered food and the sound of glasses clinking. My father stood tall in the middle of the room, raising his voice so everyone could hear. He toasted Claire as the pride of the Carter family. Guests clapped and cheered. My mother beamed as if she had personally delivered a miracle. I was standing near the edge of the room, holding an envelope. Inside was a certificate for a regional art award I had just won. I had worked on that project for weeks. My art teacher had hugged me when I won, telling me how much talent she saw in me. I wanted my parents to feel the same. I edged toward my mother, trying to catch her attention. When she finally glanced my way, I opened the envelope and held it out. She barely glanced at the paper. She smiled politely and said, "That's nice, dear, but put it away, the guests are here for Claire." Then she turned back to the crowd. I stood frozen for a moment, the certificate suddenly heavy in my hands. I folded it back into the envelope and slipped it under my arm. That night, I never showed it again. I told myself maybe another time would be better. Deep inside, I knew there would never be a better time. My father was no softer. A few weeks later, I showed him a small portfolio of photographs I had taken with the school camera. I was proud of those pictures. They showed details others missed, like the way sunlight touched the corner of a desk or the nervous smile of a student before giving a speech. I thought he might be impressed. He flipped through the pages quickly, then set it down. Photography is a hobby, Emily, not a career, he said. You need to think about something practical. His words cut deeper than I let him see. I nodded as if I agreed, but inside I felt myself shrinking. Each time I tried to share what I loved, I was told it was trivial, that it would never count. Claire's dreams were celebrated while mine were brushed aside. Looking back, I realise I carried that moment with me for years. The night of Claire's party, the wall of photographs, the way my certificate was treated like scrap paper, all of it left a mark. It taught me that love in my family was not unconditional. It was measured in grades, in titles, in prestige. And no matter what I did, I was never enough to hang on that wall. Even now, when I picture that living room, I feel the same ache in my chest. The ache of wanting to be seen, wanting to be told that what I loved mattered, wanting my parents to look at me the way they looked at Claire. Instead, I learned early to hide my excitement, to tuck away my pride, and to accept being invisible. That longing for recognition shaped so many choices I made later. It made me work harder, stay up longer, and chase every chance to prove myself. But no matter how much I accomplished, I was always haunted by the memory of that wall and the silence of parents who never cheered for me. That was my beginning. A house that looked perfect. On the outside, a wall that showed exactly who mattered, and a girl who kept trying to believe she mattered too. But something changed for me when I was 16. My art teacher, Mrs. Lawson, noticed how much I lingered over the photographs in the classroom display. One afternoon, she pulled an old Nikon camera from her desk drawer and placed it in my hands. She said, "Why not try seeing the world through this?" The weight of it felt solid, almost comforting. I lifted it to my eye, and for the first time I saw how a single frame could capture not just an image, but a feeling. I carried that camera with me everywhere after that. At first my shots were simple. A leaf caught in sunlight, a classmate laughing, the curve of a hand gripping a pencil. But each photo felt like a secret doorway, a way of showing something that others might miss. When I walked through the halls with that camera around my neck, I felt less invisible, as if I finally had something that was mine. I would stay late at school in the dark room, standing in the quiet, with only the faint red light above me. I loved watching the pictures slowly appear in the trays of chemicals. It felt almost magical to see the image rise out of nothing. I would hold my breath, leaning close as the shadows took shape into a face, a smile, a story. Those nights I forgot about the wall of photographs at home. I forgot about the endless comparisons to Claire. In that dark room, I was not the disappointment, I was an artist. Of course, my parents did not see it that way. When I told them I wanted to study photography in college, my father frowned immediately. Photography is a hobby, Emily, not a career. You need to think about something practical. My mother tried to soften it, but her words hurt just as much. Maybe you could take business, she said, and keep photography as a minor. That way, you will have something real to fall back on. They spoke about me as though I were not even in the room. Their decision was made before I had a chance to argue. If I wanted their financial support, I would have to double major. I agreed, but inside I felt crushed. So when I started college, I carried 2 lives on my back. By day, I sat through business classes, memorizing accounting formulas and marketing terms. By night, I lived the life I loved, photographing weddings and small events for anyone who would hire me, On weekends, I hauled my camera bags from one venue to another, sometimes from a church in the afternoon, straight to a reception hall in the evening. The straps dug into my shoulders until they left marks. My hands grew rough from handling equipment, typing papers, and editing photos long into the night. There were times when my roommate Olivia found me asleep at my desk, my head resting on an open textbook, while strips of negatives and photo prints lay scattered around me. She shook her head and said, "You are trying to do too much. Most people choose one thing." But I could not choose. I believed if I excelled at both, maybe then my parents would finally be proud. I remember one particular night in my sophomore year. I had a marketing exam the next morning, but I had also promised a couple that I would deliver their engagement photos by midnight. I sat in front of my laptop with the textbook on one side and photo editing software on the other. My eyes burned, my fingers ached, and my chest felt tight with exhaustion. I whispered to myself just one more hour. One more hour to finish these photos. One more hour to memorize another chapter. I thought if I could only push through, it would be worth it. When the clock struck 3 a.m, I was still awake chasing a dream of approval that never came. Yet even in those hardest moments when my body felt worn out and my mind was frayed, I still loved the work of photography. At weddings, I saw moments others missed. A nervous groom squeezing his hands together before walking down the aisle. A grandmother brushing away a tear as she watched her granddaughter dance. Children twirling on the dance floor with faces lit up by pure joy. I caught those moments and froze them in time, and when couples saw what I had captured, they often cried or laughed with gratitude. Their reactions reminded me why I kept going. In their eyes, I was not a failure. I was the one who gave them memories to hold on to forever. Still, no matter how many thank you notes I collected, no matter how many strangers told me I had a gift, it never erased the silence at home. Whenever I returned for holidays, my parents spoke endlessly about Claire. Her professors, her research, her upcoming rotations. I would try to share a story about a wedding I had photographed, but the conversation always turned back to medicine. At the dinner table, I sometimes felt like a guest listening to a family that was not really mine. Looking back, I see now how much I sacrificed in those years. I gave every bit of energy to prove myself in both worlds. I let my hands become calloused, my eyes heavy, my spirit tired, all because I thought if I balanced business for them and photography for me, I might finally earn a place on that living room wall. But the truth was, no matter how hard I worked, that wall was never going to change. Photography gave me hope, though. It gave me a voice when no one at home wanted to hear me. It gave me proof that I could see beauty and meaning where others did not. And it kept me moving forward, even when I was carrying far more than anyone my age should have had to carry. I thought, if I could excel at both, maybe then I would finally be enough. So when the email arrived saying I had won a regional photography award, I read it 3 times just to be sure my eyes had not invented the words I wanted most. The local paper asked to interview me. They photographed me in the campus garden and ran one of my winning images alongside the story. A quiet picture of an elderly couple holding hands on a park bench, the man looking at his wife as if they had shared the same breath for a lifetime. Seeing my face in print felt like stepping out of the corner of the room at last. People I barely knew stopped me on campus to say they had read about my work. My professor left a note on my desk that said she was proud of me. The woman at the coffee shop told me she had cut the article out for her daughter, who loved art. I bought extra copies and tucked them into my bag. On the walk back to my apartment, the newspaper felt warm against my chest. For the first time in a long time, I let myself enjoy the feeling. I mailed a copy to my parents with a short note. I imagined my mother taking a pair of scissors to the page and placing it in a frame. I imagined my father clearing a small spot on that living room wall and hanging it where people would see it. I pictured what it might feel like to walk into that room and finally find myself reflected back. I called them that evening. My mother answered on the 3rd ring. I could hear a television murmuring in the background and the clink of glass on a table. I said I had sent the paper and asked if it had arrived. She said, "We saw your article. It was nice. Did you see that Claire published her research in the New England Journal of Medicine? We sent you the link." She did not ask about the photograph or the interview. She did not ask what it meant to me. She moved on as if my news were only a polite preface to the real story. My father asked to be handed the phone and spoke with a kind of warm pride that I had not heard when he spoke to me. He described the journal issue and the way Claire had held it up at dinner. He said, "It is very impressive work." Then he returned the phone to my mother, who said she had to go because dinner was getting cold. After the call ended, I stood in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear long after the line had gone quiet. The apartment hummed with the sound of the fridge and the busy street below. I could not make myself move. The warmth I had felt only hours earlier drained away. I looked at the folded paper on the table and felt foolish for imagining anything else. A little later, I ordered a bouquet of simple white flowers and sent them to Claire at the hospital with a note that said I was proud of her. It felt like the right thing to do. Days passed. My phone stayed quiet. No reply. No thank you. No message that said she had received them. I told myself she was busy in the way that doctors are busy. I told myself she would call when things calmed down. Then another day went by, and another, and the quiet began to feel like a lesson. In between classes and photo shoots, I kept running into the story the paper had run. A classmate had taped it to the art department door. The barista had put a copy by the register. Mrs. Lawson, my high school teacher, mailed me a card with her handwriting leaning to the right and a small pressed flower tucked inside. She wrote that she had always known I would find my way. I held the card in my hands for a long time. Everywhere I turned, strangers offered me the thing I had begged for at home. They saw me. They valued what I made. They believed my work mattered. But the people whose names were written on my birth certificate could not make room for that feeling. That weekend, I visited my parents for dinner. The newspaper lay on their kitchen counter under a stack of mail. My mother asked me to pass the salt. My father asked about my business classes. They told me about Claire's upcoming presentation and the travel plans they were making to attend. My article was never mentioned. At some point, I lifted the corner of the stack and glanced down at my own smile, staring back from the page. I lowered it before anyone could notice. On the drive back to Boston, I pulled into a small rest stop and turned off the engine. The sky had that pale colour it gets before the first set of streetlights blink on. I rested my forehead on the steering wheel and let the quiet fill the car. I tried to understand why a room full of strangers could see what my family refused to see. I thought about the wall of photographs, about the way my mother's voice had flattened when she said it was nice, about the way my father's words brightened when he spoke about Claire. I thought about the bouquet with its simple white petals sitting on a desk somewhere, or set aside for a nurse to take home at the end of a long shift. What began as pride that morning had thinned into a kind of ache that was hard to name. It was not only disappointment. It was a recognition that the rules of love in my family had been written before I was old enough to read them. Prestige counted. Titles counted. What they could show to the world counted. The rest was background noise. I started the car and drove home with that truth taking shape in my chest. I still kept a copy of the paper clipped to a page in my journal. I still smiled when I thought of the elderly couple on that bench and how gently he had held her hand. But now there was a second feeling beside the pride, a steady, low pain that told me I could be seen by a city and still be invisible at my own table. That night, I placed the paper on my desk where the light from the window fell across the photograph. I stood there for a while, long enough for the room to grow dim and the city sounds to soften into a low hum. Then I said it out loud so I could not pretend anymore. Their love has conditions, and my work will never be enough to buy my way in. I carried that truth with me as I pulled into a small garden venue on a bright Saturday and lifted my camera from the case. I told myself that the only wall I needed now was my portfolio, not the wall at my parents' house, and that today I would focus on what I could do best, which was to notice what mattered and hold it steady long enough for people to keep it. The coordinator hurried by with a clipboard, and the string quartet warmed up near the hedges. I walked the path, checked the light, and looked for the real moments, the ones that often hide in plain sight. In a side room, I found the groom pacing with his bow tie pulled too tight, and his breath coming fast. He kept rubbing his hands as if he could press the nerves out through his skin. Standing with him was a man I did not know close enough to steady him, but not crowding him. He spoke low, not telling the groom what to feel, just giving him a slower breath to follow. He loosened the knot and said something small and kind that made the groom laugh under his breath. The room softened around them. I stayed near the doorway and lifted my camera, letting the lens find the relief in the groom's face, the way his shoulders dropped and his hands finally stilled. When I lowered the camera, the man glanced over and gave me a quiet nod that felt like we were working the same job from different sides. I learned his name later, but I felt I knew something important already. During the lull before the ceremony, a cluster of children began to fidget along the aisle. A boy tapped the chair legs. A girl tugged her headband. Before any adult could scold them, the same man crouched to their eye level and asked if they could help him find the shapes the garden was hiding. Do you see a heart in those leaves? Do you see a star in that fence? Small faces leaned closer. They pointed and whispered and forgot to kick the chairs. I raised my camera and caught the circle of attention settle like a soft blanket. He did not shush them or order them into place. He gave them something to hold in their hands. When the children wandered back to their seats, he rose and stepped aside, and if you had not seen what he did, you might have thought the quiet just happened on its own. Later, while I changed lenses by the path, he stopped a few feet away and waited so he would not break my focus. When I capped the lens and looked up, he smiled in a way that felt like a gentle question rather than a push. He said, "So you are the one who sees everything?" I said, "I try to notice what people will want to remember when the day is over." He glanced toward the room where the groom had been and toward the aisle where the children sat. He said that the small moments would be the ones the couple reached for when they needed to feel the day again, and that I had already found them. He told me his name was Noah and that he taught 4th grade. He spoke about a student who had trouble with reading until they found a story that fit the boy's world, and how the first time the boy read it all the way through, the whole class felt taller. Every child has a way, in Noah said, and it is our job to keep trying until something opens. The words sank into me in a place that had always felt empty at home. No one there had ever tried a different way in. They had one door, and it was marked with titles. I watched Noah through the rest of the afternoon and saw how he never took attention for himself. He held the veil edge so it would not drag, then stepped out of the frame without being asked. He checked on the groom right before the walk down the aisle and then faded into the rows of guests. During portraits, he kept the groomsmen laughing just enough to look like themselves, not like people pretending to be themselves. When the sun dropped low and the light turned warm, I asked the couple to follow me to the garden arch. Noah smiled and stepped back, his hands already out of the picture. By the end of the night, my shoulders ached. My memory cards were full and my head was steady in a way I had not felt in a long time. I packed slowly under a small tree and checked each case twice. Noah came over and thanked me for how I had helped the groom. I said I was only doing my job, and he said that many people do a job, but not everyone sees. He hesitated as if he meant to keep this simple. If you ever want to be on the other side of the camera, he said I could trade a real smile for a coffee. He said it lightly, Not as a test, not as a dare, just as an offer, with no price attached. I took the slip of paper with his number and said I would think about it. On the drive home, I replayed his first words to me and felt how they settled something inside me. You are the one who sees everything. It was the first time in a long time that someone named my worth without asking me to be anyone else. I told myself that whether or not I ever called the simple fact that he saw it mattered, and that maybe noticing what is real could be more than work. Maybe it could be a way to build the kind of life that does not ask me to buy my place at the table. I held on to that thought as Noah and I stopped at the overlook on our Saturday hike. The wind was cool, the leaves shifting above us, and when he took my hands, I felt a steady warmth that settled every part of me. He asked if I would share my life with him plain and clear, no performance, just love. I said yes with the same kind of quiet certainty. We laughed for a moment, and then we stood still, letting the promise sink in. On the way home, we talked about a small garden wedding, the kind where people stand close and mean it. We listed the people who had shown up for us, and we pictured their faces. By the time we reached our door, I knew I wanted to call my parents and share the news, not to ask for permission, only to open a space where joy might live. I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand and rehearsed a simple line, "I have wonderful news," and then I tapped the call button. My mother answered with the distant clink of dishes and a television murmuring somewhere behind her. I said, "Mom, I have wonderful news. Noah and I are getting married." There was a pause so small I almost missed it. Then she said, "Oh well, congratulations, dear. When is it?" I gave her the date, early June, and told her we had found a garden venue we loved. She did not ask where it was or what it was like. She said, "June is very busy for us. Your father has a conference. Claire is presenting at a medical symposium. The children have their end-of-year recitals." I said the date was set, but we were letting everyone know early. She said, "We will see what we can do." The words were gentle, but they fell with the weight of every time I had been moved to the back of the line. I kept my voice even and said, "I hope you can make it. It would mean a lot." She said, "Let me hand the phone to your father." He came on with his practical tone. He asked if it would be a large wedding or something more substantial. He asked about the venue, if the catering would be appropriate. He asked if Noah's job would allow for time off, and whether we had considered a date that was less complicated than June. I answered what I could and said we had chosen a day that felt right to us. He said, "Send the details to your mother's email, and we will take a look." The way he said "take a look" told me more than any calendar ever could. We ended the call with polite words that did not warm a single part of me. I put the phone down on the table and stared at the blank screen until my eyes stung. Noah had been sitting across from me, close enough to reach, but far enough to let me lead. He asked how it went. I smiled and said it was fine. "They are busy. We will send the details." The smile felt like a thin coat of paint over a crack in the wall. I stood and said I needed a minute. In the bathroom, I turned on the faucet and leaned over the sink. The tears came in small, quiet waves. I pressed my palm to my mouth and tried to breathe. It was not loud, it was not dramatic. It was the kind of cry your body releases when your heart has learned a lesson again that it never wanted to learn in the first place. When I felt steady enough, I washed my face with cool water and turned off the tap. Noah was waiting in the hall. He did not ask for a speech. He opened his arms and I stepped in. We stood like that until my breath settled. Then we sat at the table and went back to the life we were choosing. We picked the garden because the light there felt kind. We confirmed the string trio because the sound reminded me of mornings that start soft and turn brave. We made our guest list and wrote down the names of people who had shown up when it mattered. I took out a set of simple cream invitations and wrote my parents' names by hand. In the space for a personal note, I wrote it would mean so much to have you there, and I let that be enough. The next day, I put the envelopes in the mailbox and stood for a moment with my fingers still on the door. I did not make a wish. I did not ask the sky for anything. I told myself the day would be beautiful because we had filled it with truth and that no calendar could change that. That night, as I folded the sample menu and tucked it into a folder, I felt a small shift inside me. Love should not have to pass through a calendar to be real. If they came, I would welcome them. If they did not, I would still walk down that aisle and meet the eyes that had chosen me without conditions. I went to bed with a quiet ache and a steady calm sitting side by side. In the morning, I would get back to work because photographs do not make themselves, and because the life Noah and I were building asked for my hands and my hope. I could give both. I woke to a clear sky and the soft sound of leaves moving like quiet hands, and I told myself that today I would give my hands to the small work of getting ready and my hope to the life we were choosing, because joy is made of both. At the garden venue, the air felt clean and kind, the grass still holding a little morning cool. And inside the prep room, my friend brushed a light touch of colour on my cheeks while I steadied my breath and set my mind. I checked the seating chart once and saw their names printed on 2 front row cards beside each other, a place already waiting, and I let the sight wash through me without letting it pull me under. I turned back to the mirror and said softly enough that only I could hear it be present. Noah's mother came in with a small velvet box, held like something living, and when she opened it, I saw pearl earrings nestled inside, simple and lovely, the kind that never ask for attention and always give a little light. She said they had been hers, and before that, her mother's, and she would be honoured if I wore them today. She fastened them for me with careful fingers and kissed my hair, and in that moment, I felt a door open that had nothing to do with blood and everything to do with love. A few minutes later, Aunt Linda knocked carrying water and a soft shawl in case the breeze rose, her eyes full of the kind of attention that notices what you need before you know to ask. Behind her came Uncle Robert, straight-backed and warm, and he offered his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world, not a replacement, not a rescue, simply family, stepping into a space with pride. We practiced the first steps together, not because I could not walk, but because it felt good to feel his steady rhythm next to mine, and when the coordinator gave us the cue and the string trio began, we moved toward the aisle. The garden opened like a held breath releasing. Friends stood and turned, faces bright, and just beyond the aisle, I saw the 2 front row chairs, with my parents' name cards, resting untouched on the seats, the paper lifting a little in the breeze. I did not look away. I let that small ache sit beside the larger feeling rising in me as Uncle Robert squeezed my hand, as Noah's eyes found mine, as the day chose to be beautiful, even with the empty space at the edge of it. The vows came easy because they were true. Noah promised presence and patience and a home where no one had to earn love. And I promised the same, naming out loud the simple daily ways we would care for each other, naming, too, what I was laying down and what I was keeping. When the officiant said the words and we turned to face our people, the cheer that lifted made something in my chest lift with it. And as we walked back down the aisle, I felt both the light and the weight, both the fullness of what had shown up and the outline of what had not. In the golden hour, I could not stop noticing because that is how I am built. I saw Aunt Linda swipe at a happy tear and pretend she had not, and Uncle Robert standing taller than usual, as if his spine had borrowed a beam from the garden arch, and Noah's mother gently tucking a loose curl behind my ear, her thumb brushing the new earring with a small nod like a blessing. At the cake table, a toddler in shoes too big for him stomped carefully as if he were the drummer for our laughter, and on the dance floor, Noah pulled me close and whispered, "We are here, and this is enough," and I nodded into his shoulder because those words fit the shape of the day. A guest asked whether my parents had been delayed, and I said simply that they could not make it. And the guest squeezed my hand and said they were sorry, and I thanked them without letting the apology take over. Later, as the sun lowered, I glanced once more at the 2 empty chairs, and they looked like markers of something I had survived rather than holes in the middle of the joy. In the quiet moments between songs, I felt the earrings against my skin and thought of the small box, the careful hands, the feeling of being welcomed without a test, and I held on to that. When the night drew in around the lanterns and the last songs ran out of breath, we waved our people into the dark with leftover laughter, packed the small things that mattered, and walked to the car with light feet. At the hotel, I set my phone face down on the table and told myself I could let the day be whole for a little longer, because tomorrow would come by itself and bring what it would bring, and tonight I wanted to sleep inside the sound of belonging. I washed my face, touched the earrings once more, and lay down beside my husband with the kind of tired that feels like peace, knowing that sorrow and joy can live side by side and not cancel each other out, and that I am allowed to choose which one I feed. When the room settled into a soft quiet, the kind that makes you believe the world has finally agreed to be gentle. The bouquet rested on the dresser, the earrings were warm against my skin, and Noah breathed slow beside me. My phone lay face down on the table. I stared at it for a while and told myself I did not need to touch it. Then I reached for it anyway, thinking a quick look would not steal anything from a day that had given so much. The screen lit the dark like a small door opening. A familiar icon pulled up the feed, and without any effort from me, my mother's name rose to the top. The photo filled the screen in bright colour, a wide blue sky, a strip of sand, my parents standing with Claire and her family, all of them smiling in a way that said the day had been perfect from the moment it started. The caption sat beneath it simple and smooth. Perfect family vacation with the people who matter most. I read the words twice, then a third time, as if reading them again might untie what they were saying. My chest felt tight, then tighter, and I scrolled because some part of me still wanted to be wrong. There were more photos. Breakfast on a balcony, a tour with pineapples held up to the camera, a dinner by the water where my father raised a glass and wrote a neat sentence about family priorities. Under each image, the comments stacked up like little stamps of approval. What a beautiful family. Perfect grandparents. You all look so happy, so lucky to be together. The hearts kept rising. The hour marks overlapped with the hours of our ceremony and the last song of the night. Every picture and every praise felt like a small vote cast against my place in the one family I did not get to choose. My eyes blurred and I blinked hard, but the words did not change. Perfect family. People who matter most. I heard a sound in the room and realised it was my breath catching. I tried to place the phone back on the table, but it stuck to my hand like something hot, and when a tear fell onto the glass, I heard myself say it out loud for the first time, barely more than air. Except me. The words were not dramatic. They were the truth laying itself down with no way to dress it up. Noah came out of the bathroom and saw my face before he saw the screen. He sat beside me without asking questions and waited until I turned the phone so he could read. He did not try to make a case for them, and he did not try to make a case for me. He just said he was sorry in a voice that told me he understood what the pictures took from this day. He pressed the power button and the screen went black. Not tonight, he said. We will not let them take tonight too. The strength of his hand around mine was the only steady thing in the room for a moment. I leaned into him, and the first sob came smaller than I expected. Then the next came deeper, and then I was crying. In a way that did not belong to words. The way your body cries when it finally realises a door you have been knocking on is not locked. It is simply not your door. I told him the part that hurt the most, not that they missed it, but that they replaced it and told the world who counted while I was saying vows. I said I felt foolish for hoping even a little that a day like this might soften something in them. He did not argue with my pain and he did not feed it. He said, "We are here, and this day happened, and it is ours," and he said it again until the words made a border around the wound. When the tears slowed, I washed my face and came back to bed. I lay on my side and let the quiet return, not as peace, but as a room catching its breath after a wave breaks. The caption still moved through my thoughts like a current, but when I touched one earring, I remembered the way Noah's mother fastened it, and the way she kissed my hair, and the way Aunt Linda watched me as if I were her own. I placed that memory beside the hurt, and let them sit together without fighting for space. I did not call my parents. There was nothing in me that wanted to hear, a reason that would not change a single thing I had seen. I turned into Noah and let his arm pull me close, and I told myself that this was the last moment of the day they would get from me. Sleep came in slow circles. When it finally found me, I knew that tomorrow I would have to decide what this meant for the future, but tonight I would keep one promise I could control. I would not let them take what we had built in the sun. The next morning, the phone would not stop. My father's name kept flashing on the screen, each buzz louder than the one before. I let the first few go to voicemail, thinking I would call back when my hand stopped shaking. When I finally answered, he did not say hello. He said, "We have a situation, and we need 40,000 to stop it from getting worse." His words came fast and stacked on top of each other. A building, loan, a cash shortfall, penalties. He said I had signed as a formality a while back, so my name was on it, and if I cared about my credit and my future, I would move quickly. I said I did not understand why I was hearing this for the first time today. He said, "This is family responsibility, Emily. This is what we do for each other." The word family did not sound like love. It sounded like a lever. I asked what had happened. He said the management company had failed him. Tenants had left it, was temporary and annoying, but solvable if I would just make the transfer. Then, my mother's voice cut in on speaker, smooth and firm. She said, "Please, be reasonable. This is not the time for personal feelings. Your father has too much on his plate." I stared at the wall and said I needed to see records. I said I would not agree to anything without knowing what I was agreeing to. There was a beat of silence. Then my father said he did not have time for delays. I said then, "You do not have time for my money." I hung up before the old part of me could apologize for using a backbone. Noah was at the table watching my face. He said, "Tell me." I told him everything in a few breaths, and he nodded once and said, "Call the bank." So I did. I said my name and they found the file, and because I'd signed the papers, they read me the payment dates. The voice on the line was calm and careful. She said the last clean payment had been made weeks before my wedding. After that, 2 small holds had covered part of what was due, then nothing. The first full miss lined up with the start of the Hawaii trip. I felt the air go thin. When I hung up, Noah reached for my hand, and we sat in the quiet while the shape of that truth settled between us. I called Aunt Emma next because she is the one person in my family who tells the truth even when it is messy. I asked if she knew anything about my parents and money. She hesitated, then said she thought I knew already. She said my parents had helped Claire with a large down payment on her house, and when the kids' school bills came due and ran high, my parents often pitched in. She sounded sorry when she said it. I thanked her and told her she had helped me see the whole picture. When I put the phone down, I felt a new kind of stillness. It was like watching a photograph come into focus. They had not just chosen a beach over my vows. They had chosen Claire's comfort over my safety, and then tried to make me pay for it. I took a breath and made 2 more calls. One to a financial advisor we trusted, one to a lawyer friend who knows how words on paper can bend a life. I kept my questions simple. What could happen to my credit? What could I do to protect us? What were my options besides sending money into a hole? I wrote down what they told me in plain lines I could read back without getting lost. Then I called my father again. This time, my voice did not shake. I told him I had spoken to the bank and I knew when the payment stopped. I said I knew they had stopped right before the trip. I told him I would not transfer money. I said I would not take the fallout for choices I did not make and was kept out of. He said I was being dramatic and ungrateful. He said this was about the family name. He said I was risking the house of cards we all live in. I said I was done paying to belong to a house that would not open its door for me. He raised his voice and asked if I understood what a hit to my credit would mean. I told him I understood exactly what it would mean, and that was why I was protecting myself now. My mother took the phone and told me I would regret this when I calmed down. I said I was calm now, and I was also done. I ended the call and let the phone rest on the table. Noah slid a glass of water toward me and said he was proud of me. I did not feel triumphant. I felt clear. That clarity was its own kind of strength. We spent the next hour gathering what mattered. I saved the bank history. I took screenshots of the dates. I wrote down every sentence I remembered from the calls. I forwarded Aunt Emma's message to myself so I would not be tempted to pretend I had not heard it. Then, I sent a short email to my parents. I said we would speak face to face tomorrow on a video call with both of them present, and that I expected our conversation to be honest. I wrote one line at the end and left it there without explanation. I said I planned to treat their requests with the same level of importance they had treated my wedding. When I hit send, the room felt larger. I leaned back and let my lungs fill all the way. Noah put his hand over mine and kept it there. We did not need to rehearse what I would say. The truth was simple. They had made their priorities clear. It was time for me to make mine just as clear. I set the laptop on the dining table and laid the printouts in a neat fan beside it. Payment dates, missed notices, the reserve account that ran dry. Noah touched my shoulder and stepped out of frame. I took one deep breath, joined the call, and waited for the screen to bloom. Their living room came into view first, then their faces. Behind them, the wall was crowded with Claire's milestones. Gold frames stacked edge to edge, a silent chorus of perfect moments. My mother adjusted the camera as if she were fixing a mirror. My father cleared his throat and began to speak before the delay could settle. "We need to move quickly," he said. "The penalties will compound." "This is not complicated if you do your part," my mother added as if reading a script. "This is a family matter. Emily and we trust you will do the right thing." I kept my voice even. "Before we talk about what you want from me, I want to know if Claire will be joining us." My mother blinked, then smiled without warmth. "Claire is far too busy and frankly too important to be involved in this." My father nodded as if that settled the question. I slid the first page into view and read the dates in a steady tone. The last full payment posted weeks before our wedding. 2 partial holds covered part of what was due. Then, nothing. The first full miss lines up with the start of your trip. I turned the second page. Late fees. Notices sent to the building, not your home. Silence, and then this sudden urgency. My father waved a hand at the camera. "That is not the point. The point is that your name is on it and we need 40,000 today." My mother's voice smoothed the edge. "Darling, we are asking you to be reasonable. This is how family works. We help each other." I kept my eyes on the lens. I asked why Claire is not being asked to help when she earns far more and lives 3 blocks away. My mother's smile held. "We have already explained. Claire's schedule and reputation cannot be tied to this." I shifted to the last page. I said I had learned about the down payment for Claire's house and the help with tuition for the grandchildren. I said I was glad they could be generous with her, but I would not be the one to make their generosity possible by emptying my savings into a hole. My father's mouth tightened. He called me ungrateful and short-sighted. He said I was risking my future and our family's name. He said no one would take me seriously if I let my credit fall. I let him finish. Then I spoke. I will not transfer money. I will protect my life and my credit. I did not make these choices, and I will not carry them. His voice rose. You will regret this. You are throwing away your place in this family for pride. My mother leaned toward the camera as if that could pull me closer. You are upset about small things? We all have to be practical now. The word small caught behind my ribs. I looked past them to the wall of Claire's photos, the graduation cap, the white coat, the smiling holiday card. I felt the old ache knock once, then fall away. My voice was calm when I said it. You called my wedding trivial. Then this loan is trivial to me. The room on their side went very still. My father's mouth opened, then shut. My mother's eyes narrowed as if she were trying to read a fine line she had never noticed before. I did not speak to fill the quiet. I let the sentence do its work. When my father found his voice again, it came out in pieces. You cannot mean that. Do you understand what this will do? You are being cruel. My mother reached for softer guilt. We are your parents. We have done so much for you. I kept my eyes on them and kept my words simple. I am done paying to belong. My father began to protest, stacking warnings and consequences in a rush. My mother said my name in a tone that had always made me small. I reached forward and closed the laptop. The click sounded like a door that finally fit its frame. The quiet in our dining room felt larger than the room itself. My hands shook for a moment, then settled when Noah wrapped his arms around me. I let my forehead rest against his chest and breathed until I could hear my own breath again. I am not sorry, I said. I am sad, but I am not sorry. He said, I know. You were clear, you were kind, and you were right. We stood like that without talking until the pressure in my chest eased. Then I sat and opened my notebook. I wrote down the time of the call and every sentence I could remember, the way I would record a ceremony I did not want to forget. I scanned the pages I had shown them and sent copies to the advisor and the lawyer with a short note. Please confirm next steps. Please advise on limiting exposure. I put my phone on silent and placed it face down in the center of the table where I could see it and ignore it at the same time. The evening light was thin and honest across the floor. I felt lighter and I felt the bruise both. It is a strange thing the way relief and grief can stand next to each other and not fight. I looked at the closed laptop and understood that some doors are not slammed in anger. Some are closed because the room on the other side is bad air. Noah set a pan on the stove and asked if I wanted to cook or sit. I stood and reached for the cutting board because work done with steady hands has always brought me back to myself. We cooked in quiet, the kind that holds rather than hides. When we sat down to eat, I finally tasted the food. The night was just a night again. Morning came plain and quiet, and for a few breaths I let myself believe the calm would hold. Then the phone began to glow across the table. A cousin, then an older aunt, then another cousin, messages lining up with the same sharp edge. Ungrateful, dramatic, breaking your parents' hearts. Think of all they have sacrificed. I read the first few to make sure I was not imagining the tone. Then I placed the phone face down and folded my hands around my coffee. Noah asked if I wanted to talk or work. Work, I said, and forwarded the documents to the advisor like we planned. He cooked a simple breakfast and set a plate in front of me without comment. It felt like someone laying a steady hand on a table that was starting to wobble. The phone lit again with a group thread. Relatives traded lines about duty and family and appearances. I let it run like a distant radio. Then the screen flashed Aunt Linda. I answered. She did not ask me to explain. She said I saw the messages. I am proud of you for standing firm. What do you need today? I told her I was keeping everything in writing and that I was fine for now. She said she could put a note on the family thread if I wanted. I said yes, a short one. She said she would handle it. Before she hung up, she added the small offers that matter most. If you need a ride, I am here. If you need a quiet place, the couch is ready. It is a strange relief to be offered the simple things you were never taught to expect. After I hung up, the phone pinged again, this time from Aunt Emma, the aunt who has always told the truth, even when it made the room tense. She asked to call. Her voice was careful, like someone opening a drawer that had been stuck for years. She said, I want you to know something about your parents that no one ever says out loud. When they were young, they were belittled by their own parents. They were measured by money and titles, mocked for every short step. It did damage. Over time, they made a rule to protect themselves, achieve or be invisible. She paused. I said I could understand how that would shape people and still say it did not excuse what they had done to me. She agreed. She said understanding is not acceptance, and it is not the same as repair. It explains the obsession with status, the hunger for a perfect story to show the world. But it does not make your pain small. I felt something loosen inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a reason that did not erase the harm. I told her I would not pass that rule to my future child. The line stops here. She said she believed me and that she was proud of me for saying it out loud. When I returned to the group thread, it had grown louder, full of plans for a family meeting. One message suggested a compromise. If I paid now, my parents would make it up later. Another message asked for a meeting without Noah to keep it neutral. The old pattern was so clear, I almost laughed. Divide, minimize, reframe my no as a problem to solve. I typed one short response and sent it. I have made my decision. Please keep all communication in writing. I will not discuss this further. The dots appeared and vanished as people started to reply. Then, Aunt Linda posted her note. Emily has made a clear choice. Respect it. The thread paused. Aunt Emma followed with a longer breath. History explains it does not excuse. Stop asking her to fix what she did not break. After that, the thread went quiet. A few relatives messaged me privately. I did not know the full story. I am sorry. I sent back simple lines. Thank you for understanding. I am keeping things in writing. Then I put the phone down and walked to the window. Outside, the day looked ordinary again. The kind of sky that takes no sides. Noah set a fresh cup of coffee on the sill. He asked what Emma had said. I told him and he nodded. He said, that sounds like a reason, not a permission. We stood in the plain light and let that sentence sit. In the afternoon, I called Linda and Emma together on speaker and thanked them. I told them my plan. All communication in writing. No solo meetings. No financial transfers. No debates about the no. They both agreed. Emma asked if I was holding up. I said I was bruised, but clear. Clear helps. When we hung up, I wrote down a new rule in my notebook. Respect or distance. Those are the only terms now. Then I pulled out a small stack of cards and wrote thank you notes, 1 to Linda, 1 to Emma, and 2 to friends who had checked in just to say they were on our side. We cooked dinner early and read a few of the kind wedding messages out loud. It felt important to let the supportive voices be louder than the rest. Later, I turned off my phone, placed it in the drawer, and told myself I could rest without guard for one night. The fight would still be there in the morning. But now I knew who stood beside me, and I knew I would not stand alone again. Time moved forward in its steady way, and one soft morning I found myself in the nursery with Lily, warm against my chest, the chair rocking slow as the first light slid across the wall. I felt her small breaths rise and fall, on my skin that quiet rhythm that pulls the world into focus, and I let the room be simple. No phone, no lists, just the weight of my daughter and the sound of a day beginning. I thought about all the rules I grew up with, the ones that said love had to be earned and kept by performance, and I felt how those rules did not fit in this room. They did not belong in the air I wanted my child to breathe. I bent close until my lips were near her ear, and I whispered the sentence I needed to write over our lives. Love is not a prize. You have it from your first breath. I said it again, slower, as if the walls needed to learn it too, as if my heart needed to hear my own voice and believe it. Lily shifted and let out a small sigh that sounded like agreement, and my eyes stung in the best way. Noah stood in the doorway, with a smile that told me he had heard, and he crossed the room without a word, kissed the top of her head, and then my hair, and said, "There she is like a blessing placed gently where it could do the most good." He offered to take her so I could stretch, but I said, "1 more minute, please." And he nodded and sat on the floor by my feet, with his back against the side of the chair so that our little triangle felt like a shelter we had built together. I glanced at the bare wall by the dresser and knew what would go there. Not trophies, not ranks, just moments that tell the truth. First laugh, muddy hands, sleepy grin after a long day. I opened the new album on the dresser and slipped in a single print I had made last night, Lily asleep on Noah's chest, with morning light touching both faces, a simple picture that held more than any banner could. The old ache flickered when my parents crossed my mind, but it met the boundary I had set and passed through without catching. Respect or distance, I thought, and I felt calm rather than hard. There would be time to decide what was possible with them, if anything. There was no urgency now, not in this room. I looked down at my daughter and spoke in a plain voice she would one day understand. You will not have to earn love by being impressive. You can be loud or quiet, brave or scared, strong or tired, and I will still be here. I will look for who you are not, who you are supposed to be. I will try different doors until the right one opens. I will not keep score. Noah reached for my free hand and held it, and I felt how the shape of my life had changed without noise. The work I do, the pictures I take, the care we give each other, all of it now had a centre that did not move when someone else frowned. I lifted the camera from the dresser and took one quick frame Lily's fingers wrapped around mine, while Noah's smile sat in the corner like a small sun. Then I put it away, so I would not miss the live moment for the saved one. I rocked her once more and said, "We are okay," and I meant it not as hope, but as fact. I stood and passed Lily into Noah's arms. He laughed when she yawned, that soft baby sound that makes every plan gentle, and I opened the door to carry this feeling into the rest of the day. Whatever comes next can meet us here on the terms we have chosen. It did. Mornings found me in the studio with a kettle warming and new prints drying on a line, not grand tableaus, just the kinds of moments that make a life honest. I booked what felt right and said no to what did not. A magazine feature brought kind clients, the ones who wanted their real day, not a performance, and sometimes a teen photographer would stop by with a first portfolio, and I would see that bright, familiar spark, and remember how a camera once made room for me. At home, Noah and I moved through small routines that held us steady. Lily grew into a laugh that could turn an ordinary hour into something golden. Aunt Linda texted about babysitting before I could ask, and Aunt Emma kept a pot of soup on Sundays as if nourishment could be a family tradition we made new. My parents and I settled into what my therapist once called civil distance. We traded short emails about general updates and the weather, nothing more. If a visit happened, it was brief and on my terms, present-focused, no tours through old rooms, no accounting of past debts, and never any talk of money. Respect or distance remained the quiet rule, and with it in place, the air between us felt less sharp. The property issue closed without me. The bank sent written confirmation limiting my exposure as a signer and documenting the timeline I had kept. My credit steadied. I filed the papers away in a drawer that I rarely open a chapter, finished without fanfare. In our hallway, I hung a small grid of photographs that told the truth of our days. Lily's first laugh with applesauce on her chin. her muddy hands after the park, a sleepy grin against Noah's shoulder. On the dresser, the heirloom earrings rested in their box, a promise I would one day offer Lily if she wanted them with no strings and no story attached except love. When I think about what we built, I do not see a list of wins. I see a table set for people who show up a home where feelings are not graded and work that fits the shape of who I am. I do not need a wall to tell me I belong here. I can feel it when I unlock my studio, when Noah laughs in the kitchen, when Lily reaches for my hand without looking. If there is one thing I know now, it is simple. Family is built on love, not status. Love is the person who knocks on your door when your voice is unsteady. Love is the aunt who offers a couch before you even ask. Love is the partner who turns off the phone and says, "Not tonight, they do not get this too." And love is the promise I keep with my daughter, the one that says, "You do not have to earn this. I will still be here." To you listening, if any part of this sounds like your life, I want to ask you something plain. Have you ever had to set boundaries with your family? What helped you hold them? I hope you find people who stand beside you while you learn. I hope you build a room where your own breath can settle. And if you need it, said one more time, here it is. Family is built on love, not status. The rest is just noise.